PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. And on this upcoming episode of Vegas Hockey Hub, we're going to be breaking down a very interesting topic and kind of going to be explaining how the Boston Bruins helped your Vegas Golden Knights by firing Bruce Cassidy. There's definitely going to be a lot of stuff we're going to be breaking down and analyzing and talking about here on the show, but it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be some good breakdowns, some analysis we're going to be talking about here on the show tonight, here on Vegas Hockey Hub. I will say go to our website, PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Check out all of the incredible content that is on the website. We have about a dozen shows on the network, including Vegas Hockey Hub. So my advice is to go to the website, PRConnectionsRadio.com, and check out everyone who is on the network, including Vegas Hockey Hub. For example, we have Crypto and Cash on Mondays. So if you want to educate yourself about the world of crypto, you have Crypto and Cash. The Love of Business. So business owners in Las Vegas, they get interviewed. So if you want to learn more about the business world and learn more about local businesses here in Las Vegas, go to the Love of Business on Tuesdays. You have Cozy Stone, where she interviews parents. Very insightful, very interesting dialogue there. You also have We Got the Power with Brian Gardner, and he covers a variety of topics as well. And then you also have Vegas Hockey Hub, which I do Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to learn about the hockey world and you want to listen to a show that kind of breaks down the Vegas Golden Knights, Henderson Silver Knights, UNLV Rebels Hockey, we do that right here on Vegas Hockey Hub, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you also want to go to our social medias and support the network, we are on all massive and all major media platforms on PR Connections Radio. So on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're on Twitch. We are everywhere at PR Connections Radio. And if you want to follow your host as well, my handle is right down here at Ian J. Kelly. So if you want to follow me on social media, you can do that. If you want to follow Vegas Hockey Hub, we have a lot of options there. We have a YouTube channel where we try to post content and try to upload every single day. We have a Facebook page, so we try to engage with our audience and interact with everyone who supports Vegas Hockey Hub. We have an Instagram account where we upload the events that we go to. We try to upload photos and videos of the hockey events that we go to throughout the year for Vegas Hockey Hub. And we have a Twitter as well. So if you want to go on Twitter and you want to follow us as we do live streams, we also do live tweets on every single Vegas Golden Knights game. And we also are on TikTok as well at Vegas Hockey Hub. So once again, just going to give this a very brief reminder. Go to our social medias at Vegas Hockey Hub, follow. And if you want to go to the PR Connections Radio social media pages, go to that at PR Connections Radio. Support the network, help out the brand. If you want to follow, subscribe, and share to all your friends around the world, that'd be much appreciated. Now, getting into the topic at hand. And the topic that we are going to be discussing right here, right now, is how the Boston Bruins help the Vegas Golden Knights. Because some people are not going to really acknowledge or really understand the relationship and the impact the Boston Bruins have had on your Vegas Golden Knights. So to really break this down, we have to go back just a little bit. All right, we're going to go back just a little bit before we get into present day and talk about the current head coach of your Vegas Golden Knights. And we're talking about Butch, as some people may know, Bruce Cassidy. And Bruce Cassidy, him being the head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. But one thing that a lot of people don't recall about Bruce Cassidy is the fact that he had a really solid career as a player before eventually going into coaching. In fact, some people do not know that Bruce Cassidy was a first-round pick in the NHL. Bruce Cassidy, back in the 80s, was a former first-round pick by the Chicago Blackhawks organization. He was drafted after being with the Ottawa 67s of the Ontario Hockey League. Now, I will say about Bruce Cassidy, he spent a lot of times in the minors throughout his entire career. But one note I do have to mention is that he did play in the NHL. In fact, he played 6 seasons with the Chicago Blackhawks as a part-timer with the Blackhawks organization. And he played over 300 games in the minor leagues, regardless if it was in the AHL or the IHL at the time, the International Hockey League. Regardless of where he was at, he played over 300 minor league games, and he played around 40 NHL games in the behalf of 6 seasons with the Chicago Blackhawks organization. But Bruce Cassidy eventually would retire from playing professional hockey. So, after a near 14-year career going in between the NHL and the minors, Bruce Cassidy would hang it up, and he would become a coach. Now, to give you some of the backstory, Bruce Cassidy would retire as a player so he could become the head coach of an ECHL team. And he was in the ECHL for a couple of years before making the promotion to the International Hockey League. So he would be with the Trenton Titans, he'd be with the Jacksonville Lizard Kings of the ECHL before eventually getting promoted to the International Hockey League. Now, he would be the head coach of a season for his former team, the Indianapolis Ice, before moving over and being with the Grand Rapids Griffins, who still exist today, by the way, as he would be with them for 2 years. But something that would happen with Bruce Cassidy that I do want to mention because it is going to establish a point here, Bruce Cassidy, after being in the AHL, after being in the IHL, after being in the minors as a coach, he would eventually get hired in the NHL, and he eventually would become the head coach of the Washington Capitals. And he'd be the head coach of the Washington Capitals for 2 seasons in the mid-2000s. I do want to mention this for one important reason. The Washington Capitals of the mid-2000s had a certain general manager who will matter later on. But the Washington Capitals had this really up-and-coming general manager. He was somebody who was putting the team together. And when it came to that Washington Capitals team back in the mid-2000s, this is when they were kind of undergoing a rebuild. They also made it into the finals 1 year. But with Bruce Cassidy and a certain general manager we'll talk about later, the Washington Capitals organization would actually get Alex Ovechkin as a part of Bruce Cassidy in those 2 seasons. So the Washington Capitals, he's there for a couple of years, and then eventually he would become an assistant coach in Chicago. He would actually be with them for a couple of years, but once again, similar to the Washington Capitals situation, Bruce Cassidy would be on an organization who was in a rebuild. He'd be part of an organization who was trying to prepare for the future. So, Bruce Cassidy, to kind of establish what we're talking about here, breaking down how the Vegas Golden Knights got help from the Boston Bruins, but the way that this was done is by Bruce Cassidy, him being an assistant coach in Chicago. This actually was right before they took Jonathan Taves with the first overall pick. And then after a short cup of coffee playing, being the head coach in the Ontario Hockey League, he would go back to the AHL and would actually be the coach of the Providence Bruins. And this was actually one of his biggest tenures as a coach. Bruce Cassidy would be an AHL coach as an assistant and or head coach from 2008, 2009 to 2015, 2016. Bruce Cassidy had a long tenure with the Providence Bruins. And I do want to mention the fact that with Bruce Cassidy being with the Boston Bruins organization, he was with them for many years as an assistant coach before becoming a head coach in the AHL. And with Bruce Cassidy, something that I do want to mention about him is that it was well established that he would lead the Providence Bruins into the playoffs year after year after year after year. As a matter of fact, he actually helped the Providence Bruins make the playoffs all of the last 5 years he was in Providence. He was a good coach in the AHL. And all he was looking for was an opportunity to one day get back into the NHL and potentially be a head coach. Well, Bruce Cassidy would eventually get that opportunity. As the Boston Bruins, they would fire Claude Julien in the end of 2017, and Bruce Cassidy would become the head coach at the start of the 2017-2018 season. Now, I will mention what he did during his tenure with the Boston Bruins. This was a Boston Bruins team that in 2017-2018, his first full season playing, being the head coach in Boston, this was about 15 years since he got his first gig back in Washington all those years ago. So how did Bruce Cassidy do in 2017-2018? Well, he would go 50, 20, and 12. He would finish second in the Atlantic, but they would lose in the second round. Lose in the second round to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Bruce Cassidy, in one season of being the Boston Bruins head coach, after having to be with the Providence Bruins, after being in the AHL for almost a full decade as a Boston Bruin minor league affiliate, he eventually gets his opportunity. He eventually becomes the head coach of the Boston Bruins, and he loses in the second round in his first season as the Boston Bruins head coach. But his success would only go up from there, as in the second season, 2018-2019, the Boston Bruins would go on a great run in the Stanley Cup playoffs, as in 2018-2019, the Boston Bruins would beat their rival Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round. They would beat an underdog Columbus Blue Jackets team in the semifinals before sweeping the Carolina Hurricanes in the conference final. And Bruce Cassidy got the Boston Bruins to a 7-game series in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, a lot of people forget that we could have been potentially talking about a 2-time Stanley Cup champion in Bruce Cassidy if certain pucks and certain moves had gone the other way for the Boston Bruins. But unfortunately, the St. Louis Blues would beat the Boston Bruins. Bruce Cassidy would lose in the Stanley Cup Finals to the St. Louis Blues in 7 games in the 2019 Stanley Cup Finals. But really just stop and analyze how vital that was for Bruce Cassidy. Is that Bruce Cassidy, in his second full year in Boston, takes them to Stanley Cup Finals. This was a Bruce Cassidy who, for all of his journeys and throughout everything he had to do as a minor leaguer, as a head coach in the minors, to eventually earn his opportunity and eventually get his shot, it was remarkable seeing how he would do as a head coach in the NHL. Now, I'm going to kind of give you the cliff notes for what happened the next 2 years because it does matter. In 2019-2020, the Boston Bruins would win the President's Trophy as the best record in the NHL. Bruce Cassidy would help the Boston Bruins have the best record in the entire league in 2019-2020. Now, I will give him a mulligan on this for one important reason. All right, what happens next, I will give him a kind of a bye, kind of a pass here, because they would only play 72 games that year because of the pandemic. And then they would come back to the bubble in 2020. They'd have to play in a bubble during the pandemic, and they would lose in the second round to the eventual Stanley Cup champions in the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Bruce Cassidy had the best record that year. He had the best team in the regular season. They went 44, 14, and 12 as a Boston Bruins organization. And despite all of that, they lost in the second round, and they would lose to a team that eventually would go on to win the Stanley Cup. And then you had the shortened 2020-2021 season, where the Boston Bruins only played 56 games that year, but the Boston Bruins, while playing in a completely different division than most teams were doing that year, he would eventually finish as the third seed in the East. And after beating Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals, his former team that he used to coach back in the day, he would lose in the semifinals again to the New York Islanders. And, I look at Bruce Cassidy, and I say that once again, back-to-back years losing in the semifinals. Now, it doesn't look great, but he's still making the playoffs. He is still getting them there. And it would have to take an epic collapse for the Boston Bruins to let Bruce Cassidy go. It would have to take something insane for the Boston Bruins to eventually move on from a guy like Bruce Cassidy. Well, in the next season, the Boston Bruins would end up with a record of 51, 26, and 5. They finished 20 games over 500, but that wasn't even good enough to be one of the top seeds in the Eastern Conference. As a matter of fact, the Boston Bruins, by actual definition, would be a 6 seed if they did it by 1 versus 8, but because of the way the NHL playoffs work now, the Boston Bruins would be the 7th seed. It would be the first wildcard team in the 2022 NHL playoffs. And that 2022 NHL playoffs was impactful for Bruce Cassidy because the Boston Bruins would take on the Carolina Hurricanes, and in an epic 7-game battle, the Carolina Hurricanes would beat the Boston Bruins. And for the first time since 2017, the Boston Bruins would not advance to a second round. And despite him winning 51 games, despite the Boston Bruins winning 51 games that season, the Boston Bruins would decide to let go of Bruce Cassidy, and he would actually become a free agent after being let go from the Boston Bruins. Now, I do have to mention that when he was let go from the Boston Bruins, he was let go on June 6th, 2022. The reason why this is so important is because June 6th of 2022, the playoffs are still going on. When it comes to June 6th, the playoffs are still ongoing, but what had happened with the Boston Bruins and Carolina Hurricanes is that he pretty much was let go almost 1 month after being eliminated in the playoffs. Like, he got released, if I vaguely recall, he got released in the Eastern Conference Finals. I could be wrong, but I'm probably not. He got let go in the Eastern Conference Finals. But what was fascinating and really curious to a lot of people in the hockey world is that 1 week later, the Vegas Golden Knights would fire Pete DeBoer. And 1 week after being let go from the Boston Bruins, Bruce Cassidy would be hired by the Vegas Golden Knights. And Bruce Cassidy at the time was given a really good deal to become the new coach of your Vegas Golden Knights. And Bruce Cassidy would end up getting a very solid deal to move over and become the new coach of your Vegas Golden Knights. As Bruce Cassidy would actually sign a 4-year deal with your Vegas Golden Knights and would make him one of the better paid coaches in the NHL. There's also the same Bruce Cassidy that would be making a good amount of money during that time and actually got a little bit of a raise from what he was making in Boston. Now, this did make a lot of sense, understanding that Bruce Cassidy has been considered one of the best coaches in the NHL. It does make sense when you understand that Bruce Cassidy is getting paid like one of the best coaches in the NHL because he is one of the best coaches in the NHL. And with Bruce Cassidy, I did mention kind of to begin this show that there was a certain general manager in Washington back in the day that would come back to be related in this story. So here it is now. That general manager of the Washington Capitals who gave Bruce Cassidy his first ever head coaching gig in the NHL was the current Vegas Golden Knights president of hockey operations in George McPhee. So George McPhee gave Bruce Cassidy one of his first ever shots in the NHL. And almost 2 decades later, George McPhee and Bruce Cassidy would once again join forces here in Vegas. So always fascinating how that works, right? How every connection, every signing, every transaction in the NHL, in one way or another, if you do enough digging, they have some correlation, they have some familiarity, there is some link between player A and staff member B. There's some connection to a coach and a GM, or a GM and a president of hockey operations, or a president of hockey operations and a head coach. I think you get my point. So Bruce Cassidy comes over to Vegas. And there's a lot of expectations here. Because the Vegas Golden Knights had just missed the playoffs for the first time in franchise history. So what would he go on to do for your Vegas Golden Knights? Well, not only would they clinch the Pacific Division title, which they would. Not only would the Vegas Golden Knights have the best record in the entire Western Conference that year, which they did, but Bruce Cassidy would help your Vegas Golden Knights end up having a record of 51 wins, 22 losses, and 9 overtime losses. He would finish 20 games over 500. The year before in Boston, he finished 20 games over 500. Just the main difference is, in the Eastern Conference, you finish that high up, you'll barely be around even. You finish that high up in the Western Conference, you're one of the top seeds in the entire conference. So, for your Vegas Golden Knights, Bruce Cassidy coming over was a big deal. It was actually a big plus for your Vegas Golden Knights. Not just because of what he did as a leader, not just because of what he did as a player's type of coach, but when it came to Bruce Cassidy, this team won 8 more games than they did the year before. But those 8 wins meant from being missing the playoffs, having a record. That's how big of a deal 8 wins are. And I'm not going to go that much into detail for it, but you know what happens next. Vegas Golden Knights take on the Winnipeg Jets in the first round. They take care of business, and they beat the Winnipeg Jets in round 1. Round 2, they take on the Edmonton Oilers. After a very gritty, hard-fought battle, your Vegas Golden Knights would beat Edmonton and move on to the conference finals. Yes, they would. The Dallas Stars would take on Vegas Western Conference Finals, DeBoer versus Cassidy. And Cassidy would beat DeBoer. And then the Stanley Cup Finals, Florida versus Vegas. And a very entertaining and a very good series for both sides. The Vegas Golden Knights would make history and would win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. Well, what am I saying? We already know that. What I do have to mention is that the Boston Bruins helping the Vegas Golden Knights win a Stanley Cup is because of Bruce Cassidy. If the Boston Bruins do not let go of Bruce Cassidy, do the Vegas Golden Knights move on from Pete DeBoer? Did the Vegas Golden Knights have inside knowledge that Pete DeBoer was going to be let go. And the Vegas Golden Knights have some knowledge that once Bruce Cassidy was let go, they got to go and get him. There's always questions that are going to be answered at some point in time. But here's what I will say. How beneficial has Bruce Cassidy been to Vegas? Plenty. How impactful has Bruce Cassidy been for the Vegas Golden Knights organization? Indeed, he has. What type of leader has Bruce Cassidy been? One of the best in the NHL. And regardless of what you think about the guy, regardless of what you think about the Vegas Golden Knights management, there's some people who like the management, some people who don't. I'm not having that debate here. What I will say is this. If the Boston Bruins do not let go of Bruce Cassidy has not come here. If Bruce Cassidy has not come here, your Vegas Golden Knights may as well not have won a Stanley Cup. That's how impactful Bruce Cassidy is. And I'm going to pass this on over to you. But when it comes to the Boston Bruins organization, you really have to sit there and analyze how was this for them versus how was it for Vegas? Because we know what's happened to Vegas. We just saw it happen. But for the Boston Bruins, they win the President's Trophy with Jim Montgomery. But they lose in the first round. Would if Bruce Cassidy lost in the first round, if he was still the coach in Boston, it's tough to say. Would the Boston Bruins win the President's Trophy once again and have a historic run, a historic season with Jim Montgomery as they would have if Bruce Cassidy was still there? It's tough to say. But here's what we do know. On June 6th, the Vegas Golden Knights found their head coach. On June 6th, the Boston Bruins helped your Vegas Golden Knights win a Stanley Cup. And they did it by firing Bruce Cassidy. On June 6th, the Vegas Golden Knights made one of the most impactful moves in franchise history, and that is when Bruce Cassidy was let go by Boston, and your Vegas Golden Knights, just like a center fielder running towards foul ball, he's going to catch it. You know, it is what it is. So, when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights, you always have to look at the Boston Bruins, tip your cap, and say, thank you. Thank you, Boston Bruins, because you let go of Bruce Cassidy. Vegas Golden Knights picked up Bruce Cassidy, and the Vegas Golden Knights won a Stanley Cup. How about it? So I will say to everyone watching all around the world, this is another edition of Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. And until next time, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.
Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.